This evening's program is an opportunity to discuss the second half of our Library of Gratitude book read that we did together as a community, which is, of course, Sarah Hurwitz's Here All Along, Finding Meaning, Spirituality, and a Deeper Connection to Life in Judaism After Finally Choosing to Look There. This evening's program follows up on a program that we had Sunday night where we were able to talk to Sarah Hurwitz herself, the author. If you missed that program, it is available on our website, on our YouTube channel, and linked. So make sure to check it out. If you were there, it was a really tremendous evening. It was an opportunity to connect and to be excited about our Jewish identity, about Judaism, and also to hear some really fun stories from somebody who was in the room where it happened. She's quite a character, and it's so interesting that what she chose to do after 8 years in the White House is write a book about Judaism, like an introductory level book. So interesting, people's life path and what they do, and the way that she spoke about that, that everybody told her not to do it, but wait a while and then write the book that no one reads. And yet this is a book that speaks so powerfully to our particular context and to what we do, to our project of making Judaism meaningful for ourselves and for those we are in community with. So I wanted to start this evening by opening up to anybody who wanted to share a reaction or a thought that they had after hearing Sarah talk. And then I also have some questions about the second half of the book. So we'll be able to continue our discussion of the content itself. So just feel free to unmute yourself and or raise your hand and I'll call on you. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Was that Jeff or Eileen?
Yeah. Thought it was great. Really enjoyed it. She's obviously a very, very bright woman. And I loved her writing. She had some really interesting life story. What I would question for you is, did it bother you at all as a rabbi that she, very upfront about the fact that she has no interest in joining a congregation? Did that surprise you at all, or not? Reading the book, I guess it shouldn't be a real surprise.
No, I mean, I think it's a great question. It certainly bothered my mother, who is also a rabbi, and who read this whole book and was really, that's like the thing that was really burning for her about that. And at the very end of the question and answer period, after some people had left, my mother asked her, why not join a synagogue and work to revitalize Judaism from within? Well, I guess my own feeling about that is that Judaism isn't just synagogues. If I thought that Judaism was equal to synagogues, that the only way to build Judaism from within was to do so within a synagogue structure, then yeah, it would bother me that she did all this learning and then didn't want it to go anywhere. But I didn't feel that vibe from her at all. What I felt from her instead was an honest assessment that synagogues do not serve people like her well. And because of that, she looks for other ways to tap into Jewish communal life. It's not that she doesn't care about Jewish communal life. It's that she gets it in a different way because synagogue membership isn't serving her. And to me, the problem there is on synagogues, not on her. I mean, it's both, obviously, right? But, we do have some members of our community who are single and to nonetheless throw themselves into synagogue life. And I think that if you really asked them, they might also share with you that they had to carve their own niche, their own way of engaging, their own approach to what it means to be a part of synagogue life, because it's not obviously apparent the ways to tap in as a single person without kids in a synagogue setting. And I mean, I think that's true. I think that's sad, but I think that's true. Not to say that it's impossible, but I do think that that is a demographic group that we're not serving as well as we could be serving. So and with regard to this particular person, like, it feels to me like she is leaning into Jewish communal life, like in part writing this book and doing book talks in many different communities is a better use of her expertise and energy than if she just joined one synagogue and taught an adult ed program at that one synagogue.
Rabbi?
Yeah.
But how does a synagogue, I mean, that she's the exact demographic that we want to attract to synagogues. Right now, she doesn't have family, she doesn't have children, but eventually she will. And it's not clear to me that in 10 years, she's still going to have any interest in joining a synagogue. So what do synagogues need to do to be approachable for this demographic, for these people that aren't finding what they want within a synagogue? Or are synagogues going to be replaced by some other mechanism, some other structure?
Well, it's a good question, Andy. I think that, like, to me, it feels like synagogues as an institution are a really important institution for Jewish communal life. And I don't think that they are going anywhere long term. But any one particular synagogue might, in fact, not be serving that community very well. And I do think that other institutions and other things will be formed that do a better job at meeting those needs. I mean, already today, right? The Institute for Jewish Spirituality is an institution that is not tied to any synagogue. It is a national organization that's doing Jewish spirituality, and it's doing it better than anyone else is doing Jewish spirituality, right? I mean, there's a handful of organizations like that. There's, the Applied Jewish Spirituality is another one. There's, and then if you're looking for depth of Torah study, there are organizations that are doing depth of Torah study. If you're looking for a way to tap in terms of connecting to Tikkun Olam and social justice, there are Jewish organizations that are doing that also really well, right? Any one synagogue, like to me, what synagogue life brings that other institutions don't bring is an intergenerational approach to Jewish living and being, right? And so, right, so, but even in the way that I've just defined synagogue as unique, as being intergenerational, sort of implies a family structure of some kind, or at least, right, or at least that many of the members have that kind of family structure. And I'm honest about that. It's not that I don't think that we should be reaching out to 43-year-old single women with a lot of knowledge about Judaism. No, I definitely would want somebody like that as a member of my synagogue. But when I think about what synagogues are offering, it's a sense of community, a sense of meaning, a sense of doing something together in an intergenerational way. And if you can get those things in other ways, maybe it's okay for synagogue to not be for everyone. I don't know. I mean, it's a challenge. It's a challenging. That I think you guys are pointing, you know, both Jeff and Andy pointing to a really live challenge in what Sarah brought to us, right? Which is Judaism can be really meaningful even outside of a synagogue setting, just like it can be meaningful in a synagogue setting. Yeah, Mishka.
Couple of things. One, talking briefly about the Jewish Renewal Movement, which is not usually a building, but a sense of belonging to a congregation, or at least having a sense of belonging with other people of similar minds. The other thing is the Khavara Movement, which I think was really important for a number of us 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And I know that Gary and Deb were involved. We had retreats and a sense of a Khavara or Chavarot way back then. And I think
Right. And
they really inspired a lot more involvement than, I mean, they were sponsored, or if you want to say that, they came out of synagogue members,
yeah,
and were very much supported.
Right. And the sort of 21st century incarnation of that kind of Chavura thing is the independent minyan. And a lot has been written about independent minyanim and what they are offering to people and what they're not offering to people, right? So I will tell you right honest, like Rachel and I joined an independent minyan when we were first in Manhattan on the Upper West Side, like one of the flagship independent minyanim. It's called the Hadar Minyan. Okay, it was at some point affiliated with the Hadar Institute, and they are sort of independent. They were founded by the same people, but they do not necessarily see themselves as being a unified thing. It's not like the Hadar Independent Minyan is the synagogue of the Beit Midrash that is the Hadar Institute. They are really two separate entities, even though they have the same name and were founded by the same people. Okay, so that is to say, it's a branding as opposed to an institutional joining. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is, the thing that Rachel and I really missed about davening at an independent minyan, what we missed about synagogue life that we didn't get at the independent minyan was two things. One was a sense of intergenerational community, and the other was a sense of a rabbi, like somebody who was holding space and was interested in our spiritual lives. That is to say, the independent minyan, it was good davening, but it was entirely lay-led. I mean, some of the lay leaders were rabbis, but there was nobody who was the rabbi of the place. And we really felt like that was a missed opportunity for creating community beyond just davening together. And we went for a whole year. We paid dues. We paid way more than we could afford. We were asked to lead services. We were asked to read Torah, and we did. And nobody ever invited us for a Shabbat meal. Okay. And I think we weren't invited for a Shabbat meal because these people really thought like this is just a place to daven. And honestly, right, that community has shifted in the last 5 years because some of those same folks now have kids, and they're actually looking for something different than they were when they were single or coupled, but without kids. And that community is also, it is becoming more and more synagogue-like as it grows into itself in some ways, as the people, right? And it's still not an intergenerational place because there are no grandparent age people who are going there. Right? And so I think that's a real challenge, right? My understanding is of both the Chavura minyan, the Khavara approach and the independent minyan approach. So I imagine that the Khavara was more interested in spirituality than independent. Independent minyan was interested in like very good davening. And
Our Khavara was multi-generational.
yeah,
Not
and
many.
some were, but it was often young people with young kids who like that was
more of it.
it wasn't young people and old people and young kids, right? Synagogue offers something different. So when we got back from Israel, we joined an actual synagogue. We moved from the Upper West Side where everything felt very isolating, and we moved to a real Jewish community in Washington Heights,
That's the
where
upper
it felt like people actually cared about you. And within a handful of weeks, we had invitation. I mean, we showed up and we were immediately invited for Shabbat meals and Chag meals. And can we help you? And it's so nice to have another couple move in. And like it was just totally different because the idea of synagogue is something that can be really, really powerful.
Can I just ask, you paid dues to this Khavara minyan, but
To
it
the
was all
independent
led? What did you pay dues for? What
To
were
rent the space, I assume.
Oh, okay.
It being Manhattan, that was a very
Right.
expensive
Right, yeah.
proposition.
So you
Right.
weren't meeting in people's homes?
No, we were in the Schechter School.
Okay.
Henry.
Makes sense.
So you used the term over and over again as you were talking about what you did, and the term is davening. It doesn't seem that Sarah is much into the daily or weekly davening, but rather into discussing maybe the Torah portion or something like that. So it seems logical that for her to join a synagogue for all the reasons everybody just said, camaraderie and all of that, it's not working if all you're going to show for, and maybe her thinking is davening. So it has to be a place that's going to give more.
Yep, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, we have folks who come for the Torah and stay for the davening, right? And look, I think that davening as a spiritual practice is a thing that takes a lot of practice. It isn't obvious. It doesn't come naturally. But you do mincha once a week for a year, and after a lot of time, it can be meaningful. I mean, it can change how you think about your practice. And my guess is that Sarah knows that and just isn't interested, which is true of a lot of Jewish people. Bob.
Well, I just recall her saying in very complimentary terms some things about her high holidays service that she'd been to at that. I can't remember, it's named after the
Sixth and I.
Sixth and I, right? Yeah. And so I thought to myself, okay, what's happening at Sixth and I on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and could that happen on Shabbat? Could that happen on Pesach? Could it happen
Honestly,
on Tuesday morning? Maybe there's something to be learned for what they're doing right there. That's drawing people in. And it's obviously, if somebody just goes one time a year or twice a year, fine. But it's something to be looked at, I would say.
Oh yeah, my guess is that first of all, I think that people don't come to Rosh Hashanah services because they're great fun.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. People come to Rosh Hashanah services because they think they have to, or they feel like guilty about it, or because their parents made them promise, or because because they always do, or because it's something that connects them to their Jewish identity, or because they like to see all of the people that they're synagogue members with, and they only, people don't come because they love the davening. I don't even think that people come because they like the rabbi's sermons. I don't think they come because they like the Torah reading. Like, I think once they're in the room, they might find the rabbi's sermon to be really meaningful. I certainly hope that, right? I think that once they're in the room, they might be reading through the book and find a poem that's in the, Lev Shalem that's like particularly meaningful this year, or that when you read the words of the Unatana Tokef, after being in COVID land for a year, that the words of the Unatana Tokef like mean something different this year than they have before, right? Like I'm sure that happens, but I don't think that people are thinking to themselves, wow, I really have to go to Rosh Hashanah services so that the Unatana Tokef can mean something different to me this year, right? And so, like, it's not that I don't think that we should seriously think about ways to make our Rosh Hashanah services more meaningful. I do. And not just our Rosh Hashanah services, but as you pointed out, our Pesach services and our Shabbat services and everything. Like, I'm really invested in like finding ways to make the ways that we tap into Jewish spirituality really meaningful for us, right? And if what we're doing isn't meaningful, then let's do it a little differently and find a way that's meaningful for us. And I don't think that changing the program is going to get people in the door. I don't think that's, right? I think the program has to serve the people who are already here. And when I say the program, I mean what we do as a synagogue, including davening, including our adult ed programs, including our social events, right? It has to serve the people who are committed, like regular members. And I think that if we're serving us well and adapting to our desires and hearing from our people what we want to change and then changing those things, right? I do think that will naturally attract other people, because people will be like, oh, they're doing some innovative stuff over there. They're trying new things. They're really thinking about what is meaningful to them, right? But what really brings people in the door, what really connects people is relationships. That's it. That's the whole story, right? When somebody comes and they feel like they haven't been invited to Shabbat dinner, then they won't come again.
That's right.
Right? Like that's it. That is the ball game, right?
Yep,
And
that happened to us. And we left the synagogue.
And so to me, right, what our community has to do is serve the people who are in this community really well and help us all to be as welcoming and relationship building as possible. Murray.
What I have heard in her response to Rabbi Miriam's question is something not unique just to a 43-year-old single person. I've heard it from existing members in our congregation. And my concern here is that to suggest that other institutions that offer aspects of Judaism would be self-sufficient, would create a very serious problem for congregations such as ours and all across the country. That is, you have described very, very eloquently the ambiance, the spirit, the energy that is felt within a congregation context, and the attitude and interactions of the people. And if we don't engage in that, we're just going to be individual Jews.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there are ways to be in community that are broader than just synagogue membership. And I'm a rabbi of a synagogue because I believe in synagogues as a vehicle for Jewish life. If I didn't believe in that, I would have gone into the rabbinate and joined an institution somewhere, right? I passionately believe in synagogue as a vehicle for Jewish life, but I don't think that it necessarily means that it's for everybody. And I think it's okay for us to say, right, our synagogue is serving our community in this way, but there are other synagogues, right, that are serving different needs. And there are other institutions that are also serving different needs. And to me, that's like a really great space to be in, because we can be really honest about what we're offering, and we can be really directed and focused about what makes us unique. I think this community is a really remarkable, engaged, passionate community, right? This is a great place. I'm really glad to be a part of it. And I don't think that, right, that it serves us well to try to be everything to everybody.
That's fair.
Steve.
I think that's true, but we have to be something to somebody. And
That's
I
what I'm
think
saying.
one of the concerns is that down the road, the number of people that want what we offer is going to diminish to the point that we won't have enough people to support what we're currently doing, which is a challenge. I mean, all kinds of reasons, financially, if for no other reason. But also somebody's got to do those Torah readings every morning, and there's got to be people with the skill and the interest to do that. So I worry about, are we going to be able to maintain, are we going to serve, even if we're not trying to serve everybody, we have to make sure we're serving enough people that we have the critical mass to do what we're going to do. And I don't think Agadat Achim is close to that border by any means. We could be smaller than we are and still do very well, but we're certainly moving in that direction. And that is a pressure that I think we have to respond to. And it's probably easier to respond to it while we're still some distance away from the critical point than it will be if we wait until the crisis is nearer and then have less time to improvise.
I don't know, Steve. Like, it's not that I disagree with you. I think I don't think it's true of our community, right? We have a net positive this year on membership. That's in this year of COVID, right? Where synagogues all over the country are losing members like by the dozen. Okay. We gained members this year, even with our mortality rate and the few people who left the community, right? So we have more new members this year than we had the previous 2 years. I mean, so to me, it feels like we must be doing something right. Andy.
I think that goes to the question of, how does the synagogue define success? Is it simply membership, or is it having a minion,
Engagement.
or is it having a minion on the second day of Passover? Or, and right now we've got, for Shabbat services, we have 20 families participating. Well, where's the other 230 families that should be participating? And how do we engage them? So it's not just a membership number. Now,
I'm completely with you on that. I would love to see more of our members expressing an opinion about what they would like our Shabbat morning services to look like. But Shabbat morning services aren't the only way to tap in, right? We have people.
And when I read that book, I became enthused, right? And I haven't been getting that from the synagogue, right? So to me, there's something missing in our synagogue that wasn't spoken of in that book. And so I'm going to pose this one to Steve on the Strategic Planning Committee. How is this being addressed? Are any of these factors being examined as part of the Strategic Planning Committee?
The temptation to refer that to the chair of our working group on ritual and prayer is very high, but let me resist that temptation. Yeah, the strategic planning group has, both in the sense of having done a lot of outreach to congregants and said, what are you looking for? What do we provide that you like? What are we missing? And also thinking creatively about what are the other things that we might do that would help us draw people in. What ways can we be innovative? What way can we try to bring up some energy into things that don't currently have it? It is mostly the Ritual and Prayer Working Group that's working on it from a services perspective. Member engagement is working on it the Member Engagement Working Group is working on it from the perspective of building the community. And I'm going to stop there. I mean, everybody is dealing with that question at some level, but those are probably the two that come out fastest. But yes, it's under consideration. There are lots of suggestions that are bubbling through. I'm going to ask for the permission to not say too much because I want to let the working group speak for themselves. But when the report comes out, you will see stuff.
I mean, I think you're right, Andy. Like, we need to really be thinking about how to how to engage with the people who are members of our community. But to me, relationships is the key, right? So to me, it's about, how are we inviting people to each other's homes for Shabbat dinners? How are we making space for hanging out, on our lawn on Shabbat afternoons, picnic style? So, right, we have this huge lawn, right? If we were a synagogue in Manhattan with this kind of lawn, right, the lawn would be in use all the time, right? There's a way to invite the use of our lawn that we're not doing right now, right? But we could be doing, right? We could be saying, right? And I think we're starting to do this, right? The board has been working on trying to get some picnic tables, right, to put out in our lawn, right, to think about the way in which we can create outdoor spaces that are available for people to hang out in, right? Our swing set needs some refurbishing. But there's a way to make that swing set a usable, fun space for kids. Like there are ways to do it to make our community, our communal spaces that are building relationships. Henry.
So I certainly respect what Steve just talked about and not giving away too much about all the stuff that's going on. But just in looking at some of the stuff that these 4 subgroups have come up with, and I think Andy would just, you have to, once it's all this stuff is started, will be discussed. It's amazing all of how everybody is thinking and all the different ideas and programs that are sort of percolating. And now it's up to us in the future to start implementing. So I think it's worth a little bit of a wait to get this whole task force information down pat.
I wasn't challenged. I didn't
No.
need to be challenging. I just meant here's an example where we identified there's an issue, and we've got the strategic planning committee, and I was just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, and
there was a
that's what
mesh.
I'm saying. I think you were right to bring it up. It's just there's so much that I can't wait for people to really sink their teeth into some of the ideas.
Eileen.
But I have a question. Can I ask a question?
Gary.
Of the people that joined the shul this past year, how many of them are from other synagogues and switched? And how many of them are new arrivals or here?
Young families, old families, like who joined?
So it's a big mix. I mean, like in the last 2 months, we've had, I think, 2 young families join. Got a young family that called that with 2 kids that they want to make Jewish and have join our programs and whatever, right? So I've been working with them, and the mother's also going to convert, but with a more long-term strategy. We have, I mean, I don't know if they've formally filled out an application, but professor moving to Albany with just got a job at SUNY Albany with a 12-year-old daughter, also is looking at our synagogue. I don't know if they're going to end up in Niskayuna or somewhere else, but they've been looking. There's a handful of families that I know about who are planning to move to the area, who are related to people who are already here, who are hopefully going to be members. And as soon as I know about somebody like that, I send them an email like once every 6 weeks, thinking about you.
Every day you should send it.
I'll do it every day.
So I guess my going back, that sounds good. We have some influx, because I think we have two groups to satisfy. One is if there are already Jews coming to the area. I don't know what's happening with that, the demographics, and the other part is within and how we revitalize ourselves.
I also know of several families in the area who are not members of synagogues by choice. Like, they're not a member of Gates, they're not a member of us, but they are very active in Federation. So to me, like, that's okay. Like, I don't need everybody to be a member of the synagogue, right? Sometimes they bring their kids to our Tot Havdalah programs, right? So we're offering a program, we're offering it for free, we're offering it to the broader community. And we have people who are coming to those programs, the like Tot Shabbat programs on Zoom, the Havdalah programs on Zoom, right? That are not members of our synagogue or other synagogues. They are unaffiliated people who just want the program. And they got it because they're affiliated with Federation's list of PJ Library folks that we send out our programs to. And like, some of them are active on Federation board, right? So great. Like, I just, there are different ways to tap into Jewish identity, and synagogue life is only one of them.
Yeah.
Eileen.
The topic is bringing people in and growing the numbers, it sounds like. I feel like I'm at a membership meeting, but they which you got to have numbers, so we have to.
Yeah, we are going to take a couple more minutes to discuss this topic, which I think is a burning thing for many folks after Sarah Hurwitz's talk on Sunday. And then I have a couple of questions about the book that I will get to. But Eileen, go ahead.
Well, I just, I've basically been listening since the second question, and it's been the theme of really, it's sounding almost like, why doesn't it work with our model? And we listened to her through the book and through her conversation, and it was a lot of what you were saying, is it's all about the connection people make. So the sermon, while it's critical and all that is, the davening is important, it's the feeling you get the minute you walk through that door and your impression. We know that. We've heard that from everyone, especially her and her entry into, delving into the religion. So it's like, if somebody walks in, she had the bad experience at Hillel, she, doesn't feel that comfortable in a shul. We just have to be open to hearing that. And, we keep pulling ourselves back into an old model because it worked. People got married, they had kids, they joined their shul most likely. And the reality is the world is changing in such a significant way. And we hear that younger people, and, I know Zoe was on there, are not necessarily connecting with their Judaism through the same entry point. We need to start, like you said, we need to be innovative. We have a, fabulous young rabbi. We were in COVID for a year. There's nothing we could have done. It is luck of the draw that we had people coming in. But I liked what you said when you were giving her, in a way, I don't want to say permission, but you weren't hammering her about the fact that that's the only way to access your Judaism. And so it kind of brings me back to what you said about there are different entry points. And so if you look at us as one Jewish community and take the focus off one shul, Are we engaging Jews at every level through whatever portal? That should be our goal. And then for us, of course, we need numbers. Well, that will come if we're all stronger. So I think that theme throughout that whole book was about giving us permission to explore our Judaism whatever way makes us feel most comfortable. And there is no one right way.
Yeah, most comfortable and most challenged and most meaningful, right? That is to say, Judaism doesn't always have to give you a feeling of comfort. It can also spur you to action. It can also give you a sense of discomfort, like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that quite that way, and then and to do it differently at different time. Like, but I'm completely with you, right? I think, right, a deeper connection to life. Judaism should be giving us a deeper connection to life, right? And not this week, but last week, the Dvar Torah that I taught in my Parashat Shavua class on Tuesday was Yitz Greenberg Dvar Torah about the words v'chai bahem, that Judaism and live by them, right? In Parshat Acharei Mot, God said these are the laws that you should live by. And the rabbis understood that to mean that Judaism is supposed to be a religion that leads towards life, not towards death. That is to say, right, if this law is leading towards institutional death, if it's leading towards people leaving, if it's leading towards Judaism itself shriveling up because it is no longer vital, then that law is no longer serving the Jewish people and needs to be changed. Right? And Yitz Greenberg is an Orthodox rabbi. He says, right, he said explicitly in this week's Dvar Torah that, right, we need to be welcoming of the LGBTQ community, and we need to change, rabbis need to be innovative in changing the laws that are restrictive in that way, that are exclusive, that don't make people feel welcomed and comfortable. And after I taught that, I got a couple of emails from congregants who shared about their own relationship to folks in their lives who have experienced Orthodox and other rabbis who have been welcoming and less than welcoming, and how the way in which that can be completely transformative. And so, yeah, I think we have to be as much like welcoming and leaning towards life as we can be. And I think that's really powerful. I think it, and look, I do think that we give people different entry points in our community and that we can do better at that also, right? But the idea of sending everybody in the membership a book and saying, read it or don't read it, here's a gift, right? We're going to bring in the author, right? That's a different kind of entry point than this community has tried before. And I think it was really meaningful for people. All right, Mishka.
I give you credit for this. It hasn't happened in a gazillion years, but being out on the street when Schenectady Clergy Against Hate come out to, for whatever need, to be critical of or supportive of what's going on in the community politically. I think that's a really important thing that's happening. Your promotion of that, I think, is just fabulous, and that's a great point of entry. I think it was in part my experience years and years ago. I think, if I'm right, Zoe was part of one of the demonstrations some while ago.
I had Zoe write about it for
right. That's why I knew about it.
Mm-hmm.
But those kinds of things are also points of entry, where people are literally out there expressing Jewish values, or as Rabbi Heschel said, putting at their feet.
You might not know, but the board voted unanimously this past Tuesday night to officially join SICM as a member organization.
Ooh.
And so SICM just became interfaith just a few months ago, and we've been, of course, affiliated with or associated with SICM for many years, but we hadn't been allowed to apply for membership in their organizational structure because of our Jewish status. They changed to become an interfaith organization, and our board voted unanimously to apply for membership in their General Assembly. And so we've started that process of officially becoming members of SICM. And I think that's a really important entry point. And when the new director of SICM, which is Schenectady Community Ministries, when Reverend Amawi Tanyo Santos came to talk to the board about it, one of the things that he suggested was, look, you're a small congregation with a growing but not super active social justice arm, right? Let us be part of your social justice arm so that you can be activated in social justice in the community through SICM and activate your Jewish identity and your Jewish drive towards justice through the vehicles that are already activated in our community. This week, I talked to Joe Paparone, I forget his last name, who of the Poor People's campaign, and just thinking about, and I'm hoping to bring him to speak to us as a community, just to think about different ways to be active and what it means to be engaged in tzedek work in different kinds of ways. So I appreciate that comment, Mishka, and I do think that there are ways of activating our Jewish identity that are deeply Jewish, that are rooted in Jewish textual tradition and the Jewish wisdom tradition, that are not necessarily scripted prayer. Which is not to say that I'm against scripted prayer. I actually really like it, and I also think that there's more to it than people usually give it credit for. And I am happy to continue in a process of making scripted prayer more meaningful by doing more education about it also. All right, so I want to ask a couple of questions about the second half of the book and sort of direct the conversation a little bit in a different direction, but I think this is sort of, it's along the same sort of trajectory. So my first question is, in I think it's chapter 5, on page 107, Sarah talks about this idea that the Yetzer Hara can be channeled for creative energy rather than trying to suppress our Yetzer Hara. Often when we talk about the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara, it's all about following the Yetzer HaTov and suppressing the Yetzer Hara. But there is a Jewish idea, right, of channeling our Yetzer Hara. So do you think that people are born with an inclination to be good or an inclination to be bad? Do you, or neither, or both? What do you think of the Jewish idea of channeling our Yetzer Hara rather than trying to suppress it? And what are the benefits and pitfalls of such an approach? Steve?
I've always wondered how it is that we got the term Yetzer Hara translated as evil inclination, because
Steve, you're too hard to hear. You got to be louder.
Sorry, didn't have my mic down.
There you go.
I've always been uncomfortable with the translation of Yetzer Hara as evil inclinations, because although I know Ra usually means something like that, because that doesn't seem to me like it captures the right interplay between the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara. There's a metaphor, I think it's in Jonathan Haidt's book, about the horse and the rider, and that the Yetzer Hara is the horse and the Yetzer HaTov is the rider. And if you try to stop the horse from going anywhere, you'll succeed in stopping the horse from going anywhere. The problem is to get the horse to move, but in the right direction. And
Right.
the translating Yetzer HaTov and Yetzer Hara as the good and evil inclination implies that they're in oppositional relationship, whereas I think the relationship between them is complementary is not exactly the right word, but yeah, if you don't have both a Yetzer HaTov and a Yetzer Hara working together, you won't get anywhere.
Right.
I'm not sure if that was really an answer to the question, but I'll put that out there anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's yes, I think that's definitely the essence of this idea, is that that both are necessary. Was that an approach which was new to anybody? Had you thought about it like that before?
I've encountered this prior studies, and I think it's very significant, and it allies us, and it resonates with any other spiritual traditions. It harkens to a yin yang kind of idea: too much of one, too much of another. You need to be in balance. I think there's a lot of that to be said there. There's a certain amount of process in Judaism of elevating the animal nature towards the spiritual, and joining them. And I think there's something to be said for that, and talking about the Yetzer Hara and Yetzer HaTov in that context.
All right, so people can still answer this question, but I wanted to offer another question. Sarah talks about several purposes for prayer, and I think this is definitely worthwhile of thinking about in the context of our ritual committee, and thinking about what are our purposes for prayer. But she described several between pages 128 and 132. She describes connecting us to others, connecting us to ourselves, cultivating gratitude, awe, and humility, and spurring us to act. And I would also add connecting us to the divine other, which is with a capital O, which I mean, maybe she just sort of felt like that was self-evident, or she didn't want to focus on the God stuff. I'm not exactly sure, but to me, right, you have to add, with connecting us to others, connecting us to ourselves, connecting us to the other, with a capital O, cultivating gratitude, awe, and humility, and spurring us to act. Have you personally experienced any of those when praying? And which would you like to experience in prayer? Do you think that prayer, as you regularly experience it, can fulfill these purposes? Maybe somebody who hasn't shared. Marie?
Well, I largely do agree with her description with your addition, but I view the prayer mostly as an inner self-examination, facing the me and facing the truth, and really expressing some sort of seeking of the divine, wondering, but mostly it is getting to know myself better, being honest with myself.
Yeah, and the word lahit palel means to judge oneself. It's reflexive. So certainly that fits in with the second one of connecting us to ourselves. Does anybody find that prayer connects them to others, helps them cultivate gratitude or humility, spurs us to act, connects us to God? Is prayer working for you in those kinds of ways? Mishka?
For the most part, it doesn't connect me to others, except for my ancestors. I think about my great grandparents and great greats when I am reading the prayers. In a sense, feeling there was a rabbi in my family going back to the 1740s and feeling like, I don't know you, I will never, but this is something that you would be happy about, that 7, 8 generations, whatever later, I, as one of your descendants, do this. But I don't feel connected necessarily, except when there's music, when we're singing together. Not just mumbling or chanting, but really singing out loud.
Yeah.
That's when I feel connected. And that doesn't have necessarily to do with the words. It's the energy that's around, that comes out of being together.
Yeah. Does anyone else?
Yeah, Deborah has her hand up, I think.
Yeah, okay. Deborah.
Yeah, hi. I find that when I'm traveling in a different country or a different state or a different place, and we go into a synagogue, I think I still find it astounding that it's all so familiar and connects me so much to a larger part of who I am. It's one thing when I'm in the pew at Agudat Achim, and another thing when I'm just over in Albany at one of their shuls, and yet another when I'm anywhere in the world. And here we are chanting in Hebrew and praying, again, the connection to the intergenerationality that's been going on for centuries, but also here we are now being a Jew, no matter where we are. And so it connects me to other Jews and to the larger Jewish community.
Yeah, Mark.
I'm reminded of the old Harry Golden line. When he's going to synagogue and somebody says, "You don't believe in God, what are you going to synagogue for?" He said, I go to because my friend goes. He talks to God, I talk to my friend. That's I tend to go to synagogue basically for the social aspect of it. The prayers are fine and nice, but it's basically to be with other people. I just wish more of our friends who are members would go. I really enjoy going with the ones that do go. That to me is pretty much what it's all about. The prayers are basically, how can I put it? I don't necessarily feel a connection to God. I do feel a connection to, by going to synagogue, a connection to Shabbat, which I wouldn't feel if I didn't go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bob.
I see prayer in certain circumstances, in certain settings, certain forms, to be very strongly connecting to what I sort of learned to call the God field, if you will. To resonate with that energy and to feel connected. It requires a good deal of translation with the prayers in their current forms in many respects, for myself at least, just speaking personally. But I feel it's really important as a means of connection. And to have a minyan really means something, to actually feel the presence of the Shekhinah, of the indwelling presence within that minyan is something I seek. Sometimes I feel it, sometimes I don't, but it's something that's we need to recognize, I think. So, yeah, I think in theory, in theory, prayer should be and is a means of connection at all those levels. It's up to us. We have to put our own ingredients into it in order to make that happen.
Mhm. I think a Tupperware is fine. Well, I have a few more questions, but I'm just going to ask one more and we'll close our conversation. But the question is, this book concludes with a list of things the author loves about Judaism. If you were to articulate your own list, what would it include? And I'm just going to ask that, we all take a moment and think about it, things that we love most about Judaism, and then just put them into the chat. Let's make a list. If you want to look at the pages, it's 253, 254. But you don't have to use her list, although it can be for inspiration.
Rabbi, can you repeat your question?
Okay.
If you were to articulate your own list of the things that you love about Judaism, what would they be?
Oh, boy.
I just muted you.
Murray.
I go back to Rabbi Itz Greenberg. To me, Judaism is a guide by which to live ethically and morally for God, for other human beings, and continue to seek the divine.
Anybody else who hasn't posted to the chat want to share?
He doesn't.
Well, thank you all for the beautiful things that are in the chat. Questioning and wrestling with God,
Oh, I typed it.
personal identity, balance between the individual and the community, Jewish humor.
Oh, that's what they did.
Ethics and morality. Surviving adversity.
Take my picture up. Here. Took it.
Hafochba, hafochba dekuleba, that you can keep coming back to the same words over and over, and every time you're different, every time it's different, there are constantly new meanings. Trying to live a life that repairs the world. Connection to ancestors and each other. I wrote that I really love that Judaism is a multivocal tradition, which is a thing that I talk about a lot. Why I really like the Talmud, why I like to see the different voices within Tanakh, why it doesn't bother me so much to think about the Tanakh as a multiple documents, because to me it's a unity. It's one Tanakh that's made up of many voices, a multivocal tradition, whether that's different aspects of the divine or different human approaches to connection with the divine, matters to me less than the fact of its multivocality, that we can talk about not what the Bible's theology is, but what theologies are present in the Bible. Yeah. So it's my hope that we keep coming back to the lessons of this book, that the engagement and inspiration that we got while reading it, if we got that, inspire us to try to work to make our congregation more engaging and inspiring. That we can in fact find meaning and spirituality and a deeper connection to life together, that's our project that we're working toward. And it's also my hope that this is the first of many communal explorations. This is what I hope will be our first Library of Gratitude book, but not our last one. I hope that we are able to every year or every other year bring an opportunity to give a gift to every congregant of a book, and to bring in the author of that book for a program. If you also feel that this is something that we should do, get in touch with me and let me know that you think that it's a worthwhile approach to programming. And if you'd like to suggest a book for next year or the following year, and think about how we can move forward on it, right? This was a big project. It required a lot of funding from different sources. And if we wanted to do it again, which I hope we will, it would also require that. So it's an if this was really a meaningful thing for you, to think about what that looks like. And so that's my hope. I really enjoyed our conversation with Sarah on Sunday night. I thought it was terrific. And it's available on our website, on our YouTube channel. This program also that we just had, which I think was a very important conversation to have, is also going to be available in those same places starting tomorrow or early next week.
I'm looking to the next one, Rabbi.
Thank you. Yeah. Does anyone? Yeah. Henry.
Knowing that in just months away, we're going to be celebrating our 130th year. That is a time when maybe the idea of raise some of the funds that I'm sure we'll need to raise, because it's our 130th, and what do? We have some kind of fundraising campaign. That some of the money can be put toward having reserves for exactly what we just did with Sarah's book, buying it and giving it out and having sessions like you just had.
All right. Seems like a nice, good idea. Talk to your board members and the other folks who help make those decisions. And I mean, everything is a balance. And I think this was worthwhile in a lot of ways, even for the folks who just read the book or who have the book on their shelf and will read it someday. Or, I got a lot of emails from people who read the book and then passed it on to family members or children or grandchildren. And I think there are other really great books like this out there that would be good. Our synagogue's educational theme next year is Israel, and there are books coming out all the time that would challenge us in different kinds of ways in how we engage with Israel. And I think that engaging with Israel is a really important, that's something that this book completely ignored, which is fine. I mean, that wasn't what she wanted to talk about.
That was refreshing in a way, Rabbi.
Well, I totally agree with that. I do. I think that sometimes we get too much invested in a vision of Jewish continuity and Jewish identity that's, you've got to support Israel because you're Jewish and nobody else will. You've got to respond because of the Holocaust. I do think that sometimes we get tied into a very sort of 20th century approach to Judaism, and maybe this was a more 21st century approach. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't engage with Israel. And the ways in which Israel is difficult are also important to deal with, I think. So I'm hoping that we'll do some of that over the course of the next year, and maybe even a book that's connected to that. All right, so it's almost 8:45, and I think it's time to close out this part of the conversation, but I want to encourage everybody to let the conversations continue, both with me and with each other, as we continue to enjoy the process of engaging with our Judaism and our Jewish identity.
Can we count the Omer now?
Absolutely. Yeah, I got my Omer email while we were talking. So
that's what made me think of it.
So I'll just share that on the screen. Okay, there's my Omer email. All right, please rise. Baruch
atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav
v'tzivanu al sfirat
Omer.
Hayom Shlosha Shehem
Arba'a Shavuot v'chamisha yamim v'Omer. It's 33 days.
4 weeks and 5 days.
5 days of the
Omer. And that is, of course, Lag BaOmer, the holiday of the the festival of Lag BaOmer, in which the plague that was afflicting the students of Rabbi Akiva ended, and it is now permitted to get haircuts and to shave.
And to get married too.
And to
It's
get
our
married.
anniversary.
We got married on
A lot of anniversaries on Lag BaOmer. And there's a quote here from Harry Tubman. I looked at my hands to see if I was the same person.
Israeli and American papers
Glory over
pretended info.
everything.
Are
The
now
sun
reporting
came
that
up
he
like
dead
gold
moved
through
at a
the
stampede
trees,
at
and
the
I felt
Khavara
like
over
I was in
celebration
heaven.
of being Road, the traditional grave of Shimon
Hod
This is-
Shabbat.
I've never heard of such a thing before. These relations. It is right. I think so.
What have I done that was truly surprising and delightful? What might I do that is surprising and delightful? Glory within glory. Hod Shabbat. All right. Ala Tov, everybody.
Well,
Tov,
thank you very much.
Tov.
You,
Shabbat shalom.
unfortunately, you'll find that at a Lag BaOmer in Israel, there was an accident. So
Oh, no.
look for that on your phones.